So just to get started, are we controlling the slides? Click on, no. There we go. So here's Dixie's disclosure slide. She had nothing to disclose. So what we're going to be talking to you today is really about developing your workforce, and we're going to split this into three separate sections. The first one is about if you're an investigator doing a sort of a simple in-house study. This is often done at the beginning to get pilot data. It's usually done within your own institution, and sometimes it's done with departmental funds or a small grant that you may be able to get. Then we'll move into the section on if you want to be a site PI of a multi-center clinical trial. So if there's either an industry group that's running a study, or if there's another group with an NIH funding to run a multi-center clinical trial, and how would you interact and be a site investigator in that type of a study. And then Nazem will be talking a little bit more about the big step, the next step, moving into a multi-center clinical trial, and maybe how your workforce will really change in each of these three categories. So it's developing your workforce when you're doing a small in-house pilot study, when you're going to be participating in a multi-center clinical trial as a site investigator, and then if you were going to run as an investigator, you're going to run a multi-center clinical trial yourself. Next slide is about, what is a team? So we really want to think about developing your workforce. It's really important to have a team atmosphere with your staff. So a team is defined as a group of people that are interacting independently, and they share responsibility to achieve a common goal through effective communication. Not every group of people that meets is a team, and I think that's a really important point. Just because you have a weekly meeting or you have a regular meeting doesn't mean you have built a good team. So it's really important to think about what are some of the high-performing teams. How do we create high-performing teams? So some of those things are to have a clear and engaging goal for the team. Every team needs to have a goal in mind and all be focused on the same goal. They have to have clear expectations and performance measures that they know that they're trying to meet. There should be, they should produce high quality output, so they should know what their output is, and then they should be able to produce that output. You want to promote growth of all the team members. If everyone feels supported and feels like they're being promoted, the quality from within, it makes a very positive experience for everyone on the team, so it makes them much more high performing. And really, everybody should be learning and growing as one unit. So there shouldn't be individualism within the team. Everybody should know their individual role and then how it fits into the larger picture. So that's really one of the things you want to do, whether you're building a small team or a large team. That's sort of some of the qualities of a high-performing team. Clinical research teams, when you say from the few to the many, so again, we're going to be doing some learning about whether you're doing this as a single person doing a study, or if you're going all the way to a multi-center clinical trial. There are three major pieces that are involved, so you really have to think about the science in a clinical trial, what the regulations are, and then what the operations are. All three pieces are sort of equally important. So the science, you need to have the investigators, the clinicians involved in that, biostatisticians to help you design studies, sponsors, financial sponsors, people who are going to be able to fund the study. You have to think about regulations. Regulations are sort of the necessary evil that come with all clinical trials, whether it's a local regulation with the IRB, your Institutional Review Board, whether you're working on a study that's regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, so the FDA. There are regulations that are involved in NIH, both in applying for studies and then conducting clinical trials. There are financial regulations that are involved about how you spend your money and how you account for money. So grant accounting is another very big piece of regulations for a trial. And then operations. Operations is really key in making sure that your trial is successful. So we're going to talk a lot today about study coordinators, how to hire, how to train, how to keep good study coordinators. But you also need people in the IT field. You need people in data management who's going to manage all of the data that you collect in your study. And then project management sort of pulls it all together in all those pieces. So all three of these pieces of a clinical trial, whether you're doing a single center study or you're involved in a multi-center clinical trial, all three pieces have really equal weighting when you're planning a trial. So what if you're a team of one? And this happens oftentimes very early in career. You know, you really have to think about planning a study on your own. The first thing you have to do is you have to define your personal research strategy. You want to know, what is your strategy going into this? What are you trying to get out of the study you're trying to design? You should be thinking about resources at your own institution. You may feel like you're a team of one, but really there are a lot of resources at all of your institutions that you should think about. There may be a group within your institution that has a pool of coordinators that you may be able to tap into. If you don't have 100% funding for a coordinator to work with you, maybe you can sort of rent a coordinator. You can take only 10% of someone's time or 20% of someone's time to help you on a very small pilot study. You have to really be creative and work with your colleagues to think about how you might be able to do some time sharing with key players that you're going to need to run a study. The other key resources, and I know you've heard a lot about this throughout the course as well, is thinking about your CTSA. If you have a CTSA at your institution, there are a lot of resources. You just need to tap in. You need to make good inroads and talk to people about how they've done this in the past. You should think about the research infrastructure at your institution, especially when it comes to financial management and grants management. There's oftentimes a full infrastructure within each institution to manage these types of aspects for a clinical trial. So you really should tap into all of those and get to know key people so that when you're running a study, whether you're doing it as a single person or whether you're part of a much larger team, you know what the research infrastructure looks like and you have key contacts within those departments. You should also all have mentors, obviously, at your institution and at other institutions that can really help you to define your goals, define your study. And so those are some of the resources you can tap into, even if you are truly a team of one when you just have your initial idea. Oftentimes your teams are going to grow to 2 or 3 or maybe even more people. So what happens when you grow? The first thing, and I think you'll hear this throughout this presentation numerous times, is you need to hire a good coordinator. You have to make sure you have a good coordinator, whether it's you have 25% of a coordinator or you have 100% of a coordinator. You want to make sure that you have a good working relationship with that person. You have to provide that coordinator with access to all the information about the trial and all the tools that they're going to need for that trial, whether, again, it's a single center study at your own institution or it's a larger study. You want to provide the coordinator and the other team members with an opportunity to be truly engaged and involved in the study. The more they're engaged, the more helpful they're going to be to you. So have them attend IRB meetings if that's a possibility at your institution. Have them attend an investigator meeting if, again, that's a possibility at your institution. And if there are any professional or society meetings that they can attend to help them build their career and keep them going with professional development, that will help to engage them and keep them interested and happy at your institution. Again, the last point here is not holding your coordinator back. And we do this all the time when we build teams at the Clinical Coordinating Center here at Mass General, and I know Dixie does this all the time at the University of Iowa at the Data Coordinating Center there, is making sure that we promote people from within and give them additional responsibilities, and if it's time for them to grow beyond this position, to support them in that, because other team members will see how you treat each other, and that's really important for having a high-functioning team, is to support people to go elsewhere. So identifying the right team members, who do you need on your team? And this will really depend on your study. Again, if you're going from a very small study to a larger study, you want to know who has the protocol expertise. So you may be the clinician that has the expertise in your field, but you probably have colleagues and peers both at your own institution and at other institutions. And I know through this course you've been getting a lot of protocol expertise from your mentors. You want to talk to coordinators. You want to talk to other people who see these patients to think about what are the protocol procedures, what is the right outcome measure to be using in a trial, and how often should you be collecting that outcome measure, and how long does each procedure take? If you're going to be doing these procedures on patients, if you book a patient for a 12-hour visit, you're going to have problems enrolling that study. So you want to really have your coordinators and other staff members involved when you think about the protocol procedures. In terms of drug delivery, you want to think about laboratory procedures. These are all the things that you have to create a team that encompasses all of these pieces. Regulatory, who's managing all the regulatory pieces, safety management, there's again financial management of a study, who's going to be collecting the data, and then who's going to be analyzing the data in your trial. So again, this next slide sort of goes through some of these experience and some of the people that you want to look for, what type of experience they should have. So in terms of protocol expertise, as I said, you've been getting a lot of that through this clinical trials methodology course. You want to have people that understand good clinical practice, they understand equipoise, they understand sort of what the clinical question is you're trying to answer. Again, when you're thinking about adherence to a protocol, you want to make sure the protocol procedures are clear and are actually doable. So making sure that you use your study staff, your coordinators, experienced coordinators that have seen these patients and that really understand good clinical practice involved in the planning of your study. Drug delivery is a very big piece. Making sure you have someone that has pharmacy expertise. If you're using an infusion drug, you need different expertise than if you're using an oral medication, or if you're doing a biomarker study, then you don't have any drug delivery. So thinking about all of these pieces, and you may need a central pharmacist to be on your team while you're planning a study. In terms of laboratories, again, when you're planning a study, you have to think about, will your laboratories be done centrally, or are you going to be doing them on site? If you're doing a single center study, then all of your labs will likely be done at your single center. Do you have the equipment available to do all of these pieces? Do you have the centrifuge if you're doing certain things that you need to centrifuge the samples for? If you have to ship them to an outside lab to do a special test or PK analysis, do you have dry ice? Do you have freezer space? What are the regulations involved for shipping samples out to an outside lab? You have to think about safety management. You have to understand all the regulations that are involved, both from an FDA perspective, but also from your own IRB. And if you have NIH funding, from a DSMB or from a safety board that's involved with NIH. You have to understand what all those regulations are and who on your team is going to manage all of that piece. From a regulatory perspective, again, if your IRB submission, you need somebody that has experience in working with your IRB. Does your IRB do electronic submissions, or are they paper submissions? These things can really make a difference of having a successful study or having a study delayed because of problems with getting things into your IRB. If you have to submit something to the FDA, you need someone who has experience in doing FDA submissions, both from an original application to FDA. There are very specific guidelines for how you apply to the FDA, but then you also have to do annual reporting to the FDA, and you have to do safety reporting if you have adverse events that need to be reported more frequently than annually. So you need someone with experience in that field of regulatory submissions. And again, you need someone who has financial background, so someone with knowledge about grants and accounting, and institutional knowledge about how a grant gets submitted through your institution, and then how a grant gets managed, and how the funds are managed, and the progress reports that are required for each grant. Data entry and data management is a very big piece of a clinical trial. If you're going to do procedures on a patient and you're going to take the time to enroll patients and use both your coordinator's time and your patient's times, you want to make sure that you're collecting the appropriate data and that it's going into a database so that it can be analyzed and you can answer your question at the end of the study. So paying attention to who is doing your data entry and who's doing the data management, making sure that the database meets regulations, whatever those regulations might be for your individual study, and then that you have expertise, a biostatistician, and expertise on analyzing that data to ensure that you'll be able to look at the data at the end and make some analysis of it and move on to hopefully your next phase of study. So what if you're a PI of a larger team? What person is really best in some of these roles? So again, if you have protocol expertise, it's, you are the investigator, you are the main person that knows the expertise of what you're trying to do with your protocol, but you do want to involve other people. You want to have co-investigators, you want to have coordinators. You know, for protocol adherence, it's really the same group of people that need to look over your protocol. Again, these are all the different people from, you know, drug delivery and laboratory and regulatory. Again, you want to have some people, or at least have resources. You don't need maybe 100% of someone that knows all the regulations and can manage your study from a regulatory perspective, but you need to know if there's an institutional person that can help you with all those procedures or help your study coordinator. This just lists a little bit about who some of the key people are at most institutions who handle these things. So from a safety management standpoint, you as the investigator and your coordinator will really be looking at that. If you have a larger study, you'll be having, you know, an independent medical monitor, or maybe a data and safety monitoring board. From a financial standpoint, it's usually your institutional resources that will have some type of a grant or accounting liaison position. In terms of data entry and data management and data analysis, you can either use someone within your own institution to do the data entry. It's usually a student or a coordinator that might be doing the data entry, but then the analysis is oftentimes done by a biostatistician, and again, whether that's within your own institution or you're partnering with someone at another institution to analyze your data. So in terms of the responsibilities for you as a principal investigator, if you're doing a single center study, you have a lot of responsibilities. You're really setting up your site for your single center study. You have to identify all the right team members, as we've sort of gone through all the different pieces of that. You need to define the roles and make sure that, you know, oftentimes you may be wearing a lot of the hats because you only have a small percentage of each person. There's going to be, you know, ongoing supervision and training of all of the staff. At closeout, you're going to have to make sure your data is clean and your IRB gets closed out. And those are some of your overall responsibilities as a single center PI. I'm going to move right into my next part of the presentation, which is about if you're developing the workforce and you're going to be a site investigator for a multi-center study, and how do you really develop your workforce for participating in a multi-center study. So what are some of your responsibilities? It's very similar to being running a single center study, but you have some more responsibilities. You have to think about, do you want to participate in the study? If you're going to sign on to participate in a study, you need to be sure you want to do that. You want to review the protocol, the budget, think about the contract, and we'll get into all these pieces. You also have to think about, on an ongoing basis, there's even more training and supervision of staff. You want to make sure that you are overseeing all adverse events and all safety events in the trial for your particular site. You don't review everything for the entire trial, but for your site, you're reviewing everything. And then closeout responsibilities are the same as if it's a single center study. So you really have to think from a site investigator perspective, your reasons for joining a study. Do you want to join a study? And the first question really being asked is, if you read a protocol, you want to know, is the question that's being asked in that protocol, is it important to you? Is it important to your patients? Is there really a good question being asked? And do you have patients that might benefit from your being involved in that clinical trial? Some people say they join a study to make extra money. That's really not going to happen, and it often does not happen. So to be a good site investigator, when you're thinking about participating in a multi-center clinical trial, a sponsor will think about, you know, choosing certain centers to participate in their trial. So they'll do a feasibility assessment, and one of the things they're going to look at is, should they choose you as a site? What they're looking for is they want to know that you're a PI that doesn't think that they know absolutely everything. They don't have to be an expert on everything. It's more important to a sponsor that you have actually recognized where your strengths and weaknesses are, and that you hire staff that complement those, because that shows that you have a good study team. So you'll be seen as a very positive site if you have a really good team and a high-functioning team to conduct the study. You have to show sufficient interest in the study in order to show the sponsor that you're really going to conduct this study and have strong interest in it. You also have to have an adequate patient population. They have to know that you have enough patients that would meet the criteria to be entered into the study. And if your site has a past history of successful recruitment in studies, that's another very beneficial thing. And overall, just having good performance in previous studies will ensure that you'll be asked to participate in new studies going forward from a sponsor. Another really key thing you need to look at is you need to look at equipoise. You have to be comfortable when you review this protocol and this budget to be comfortable that there is equipoise. So no matter what treatment your patients are randomized to, it's both ethically and clinically acceptable to you and to all subjects. You're going to play a key role in reviewing things with your IRB and answering any IRB questions that come up. And you also want to really carefully look through the payment schedule for the study to make sure that you can actually, you can do all of the things that you say. If you say you're going to enroll 5 patients, you can truly enroll those patients because you have them, but you also have the financial ability to get reimbursed properly for the study. When you're thinking about site organization, the #1 rule is always to hire an experienced coordinator, and the level of experience of the coordinator will really depend on your study and what it is. Is it an interventional study? Is it a biomarker study? Do you need a nurse coordinator? Or do you hire someone that does not have a nursing background? So that's really important. The #2 rule is to arrange for a backup for your study coordinator. You want to make sure that your coordinator is supported. They can take vacation. They can be sick a few days. And if there is staff turnover, you always have another person in the backup that can take over. So some of the site startup tasks is to hire your appropriate personnel, making sure that you hire the people that are required, as we sort of went through in the last set of slides, that you have adequate space and equipment for the study personnel and for all of the records that go along with managing a clinical trial, that you arrange for your financial management. Again, you want to make sure that you know who is managing things to determine is a procedure billed to a patient or their insurance, or is it billed to a study personnel. And you also should think about, if you're being paid by a sponsor, how often do they pay you? Do you need to invoice the sponsor? Does the sponsor invoice you or send you checks based on your enrollment? You should know that clearly right up front. And also think about laboratory and pharmacy setup. Recruitment, when you're recruiting patients into a multi-center clinical trial, or really any trial, it really comes down to a local effort. So if you're going to be recruiting patients from your own practice, you need to both have the means and the IRB approval to do that, to look for eligible patients. If you're going to be recruiting from outside physicians or colleagues, you want to make sure that you engage them, you educate them about the study, you motivate them to refer patients to you and to potentially be screened for your study. And you want to make sure that you know what your recruitment strategies are beforehand. Oftentimes sponsors will ask you that when they look at whether or not your site might be a site that they want to have participate in their studies. They want to know how you're going to recruit patients. Most important thing you need to know as a site investigator, when you're running a study at your site, the buck stops with you. You are the person who's ultimately responsible for the success for the trial at your individual site. So having really a great relationship with your coordinator will help you to make sure that you live up to that responsibility and that the study goes well at your site. I'm not going to read this slide to you. This is, if you're participating in a multi-center clinical trial and it is regulated by the FDA, you will be asked to sign as the site investigator what is called the FDA Form 1572. I'm going to suggest that before you ever sign a 1572, you read all of the agreements. It's scary. It basically says you will do everything perfectly. So it's very important that you read this and you know what the expectations are from the sponsor and from the FDA. This is a contract that you're signing, and it's your signature that says you will do everything. So just to review, overall your site PI responsibilities, recruitment. Sponsors are going to look to you. Are you able to recruit? You want to review recruitment with your staff and make sure that you're living up to your commitment in the study. You want to make sure that you and your staff are adhering to the protocol, that you are monitoring safety adequately within your patients and reporting any safety events as needed. You want to make sure that you have overall oversight for everyone at your site that is participating, your entire study team. That you've clearly delineated what the roles are for each person on your team, and that you provide support to your team, both your internal and any external people. You provide them with support. So really, this summary of a good site investigator participating in a multi-center style is they understand the goals of the study, they accept the ultimate responsibility for success for the study at their individual site. This person knows that they do not know everything, and they recognize that, and they hire complementary staff to make up for that. with the right skills, and that they respect their staff. I think that, you know, the most important thing is that you have good respect amongst your team, again, so it can be a high functioning team. I'm gonna put this on pause for 1 second while I switch over to Nazem, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about managing a multi-center clinical trial. Okay, Nazem, I just need to stop my webcam. No, start my webcam.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
All right, sorry. I feel like it went too long.
No, it's perfect. No, it's still.
Okay.
Hello, I hope everybody can still hear me well. So Marianne talked about managing a clinical study at one site, and you know, she talked about the possibility of being a kind of a one-man show or like a single person kind of team. And I want to say that this definitely is not going to happen if you want to conduct a multi-center clinical trial. This is a big operation that is going to require a relatively big team with a lot of people that you interact with even outside your team. This is my disclosure. I provide consulting for Biogen and other companies. So just think about the clinical trial and in terms of timeline and functions within these timelines. You can divide them into 4 different components. The first component is the project concept. This is the beginning when you started to kind of apply for your grant and all of that. The second is the study startup, which is getting everything ready before you enroll the first patient. The third would be the first subject in, which is the first person that enrolls in the study until last subject last visit, or last subject visit. This is the last person who in the study that completes the last visit. So that kind of concludes the actual acquisition of data for the study. And then you have the study completion, which involve a lot of aspects, including data analysis and all of this. It's just like, let's dive a little bit more deeper into the stages. So the project concept, you have probably at that time, you have the protocol synopsis. So you have an idea about the question that you're asking and how you're going to try to answer that question. You would have the schedule of activities, so you kind of know approximately what's going to happen with each patient and how the visits are going to be structured and what kind of tasks are going to be happening within the visits for these patients. Probably you have the grant awarded, and probably you have a contract signed between your institution and the granting entity, whether it's NIH, whether it's a foundation or a DoD. And then at that time, probably you need to start to think about a steering committee, people with a lot of experience who can help you or mentors that can help you to conduct the study. Then once you have all of that, then this is when you have the study startup. At that time, you really need to work on a final protocol for the study and a template or model for consent form. You need to decide how many sites you need and select these sites. You need to conduct site training for these sites, training on the procedures, on the outcomes, on the protocol, all of that. You need to have contracts with these sites. So usually these are subcontracts from your institution to all of the other sites. You need to develop manuals of procedures, MOPs for your protocol that describe everything from outcome acquisition to sample collection and processing and all of that. You're going to start working on an IRB approval, whether it's your coordination center IRB approval or the site local IRB approval. You need to find vendors for what you need for the study, whether it's a device or a central lab. You need to set all of these up, the vendors, and you need to start getting contract with the vendors. You start working on the case report forms. If you want to establish an electronic data capture system, you need electronic case report forms. Start building that electronic data capture system. This is a system that the sites will use to enter data on the trial to kind of keep the data centralized and tracked. You want to think about drug. Who's providing the drug, where are you buying the drug from, and who's going to do the packaging, who's going to do the labeling of the drug, is this going to be placebo, who's providing the placebo, how the labeling is going to happen, who's blinded, who's unblinded. You need to set all this up. Data management plan, very, very important to set it up from the very beginning. Study monitoring plan, this is whether it's safety monitoring or monitors that go to the sites and then verify the accuracy of the data collection. You need a statistical analysis plan from the very beginning, because that determines what outcomes you're going to analyze, and you work backwards in terms of what data you need to collect and how you need to collect these data. And then finally, once you have most of these and you're kind of really ready to enroll the first subject, then you have the investigator meeting. And you have a checklist of all of these, and this is you move on to kind of the first subject in, like the first enrollment of the first patient in that trial. So this is it will be a very exciting time. The startup actually is one of the busiest times. It takes a long time for most part, and you know, all towards that goal of enrolling the first patient. So you have that kind of first patient in, very exciting, and from that moment you start thinking about enrollment or meeting the enrollment goals. You start thinking about patient retention, people dropping out from the study. You think about protocol adherence, are all the procedures that you wanted to be done, all the outcome measures that you plan to collect, are all of these being collected, and are they collected properly? You start worrying about safety monitoring and how you know, you looking at the data and monitoring the safety, adverse events, serious adverse events, study monitoring as well, drug supply and distribution. It's an ongoing process. You know, a lot of the trials, the sites will receive the drug at different shipments. Who's going to keep track of this? Payments, you start to pay sites, you start to want to pay vendors. You need to have a system for invoicing and keep looking at that. Continuous data management and data monitoring, ongoing site training with site turnover, and newsletters for the sites to keep them updated on the status of the trial, and actually keep them excited about the trial. Then after you conduct your trial, and then you have the last subject last visit, and then you really need to kind of work towards data analysis. So you do data queries just to be sure that the data is nothing missing, doesn't make sense, and then data lock. This is the step before data analysis, and then you do the data analysis based on the statistical analysis plan that you had set up in the startup time. And then the output would be the final study report, which goes to sometimes to the granting agency or to the legal authority like the FDA, and then a manuscript that you write with your study team, and publishing the data, share the information, and then post hoc analysis happens afterward after you publish. So the project team, it's really a big team. So kind of to separate, you have the kind of core project team, which are the people that actually you need from day one on your team. And then you have all the kind of satellite teams that you want to interact with very closely, and you need to establish very clear communication flow between your core team and then the outside teams. So you have a steering committee, you have the DSMB, you have consultants, you have medical monitor, you have all the sites, you have the sponsor who's sponsoring the study, you have the vendors that you're interacting with, and then other entities that you interact with. So the core project team is really the people you're going to start working with from day one. And who are these people? So the PI and the co-PI for the study. Project, you definitely need a project manager for multi-center study, definitely data manager. If you have if you want to use a electronic data capture system, you need a system analyst to kind of help you set up that system and build it. You need a safety management team to manage adverse events, serious adverse events, protocol deviations, etc. You need grants and contracts managers to help you with all the contracts with the vendors, with the sites, and the payments. You need study monitors to go to the sites. They can do in-person monitoring, or you can do kind of remote monitoring using the electronic data capture system. You need to train the sites on the outcome measures. You know, not all all the coordinators will have training when you start the study, so you want to be sure that you provide that training. And you need administrative assistant, which is something that actually you should keep in mind when you're building that big team. There's going to be a lot of meetings, a lot of calls, a lot of in-person meetings. So you need somebody to help you with setting all of these things up. You don't want to be the person doing that. So the core project team, and this is a slide that Dixie actually helped me put together. It's a great slide, and the word glue, actually I love the word glue, that you really want to glue the teams together. So you know, just looking at this, you really need to have a kind of overall insight into what you're trying to accomplish, and work backwards into clear communication of the tasks and responsibilities for each team member. So you give them clear instruction, whether it's in writing a very good clear protocol telling the sites what to do, or writing materials for training and education, or designing a good data collection system that actually matches the data that you want to collect, matches the source documents and that's what the sites are working on. You really want to be sure that the data is good for the analysis, the data collecting is good for safety monitoring as you monitor safety for in this study. You need standard operating procedures. So in most teams, if you have clear instructions, all of these actually are instructions, from the protocol to the SOPs to the data capture, all of these are instructions. If you have instructions and a system in place, your team will be glued together and will work effectively. Regular and effective team meetings. So this is very important. I think the word effective is more important than regular. Not, you know, if you have team meetings that don't have a clear agenda, clear goal, and clear outcome, and kind of to-do list after these meetings, these are not very effective meetings. So think about the team meeting, think about what you want to get out of the team meetings, and then try to work towards that. And adequate funding is always important for the team members to be sure that they're not overworked, and they're not that they have the time to do the task that that is allocated to them. So timelines, very, very important in clinical trials because it has a lot of implications. It has a lot of regulatory implications, had a lot of budgetary, financial implications. If your enrollment kind of is delayed, or your startup time is delayed, so all the kind of effort levels and the budgets and all of that, that all kind of falls apart. So it's good. It's very important to have timelines, and realistic is the key word in this slide. Realistic timelines. From the very beginning, from the planning to startup to the execution to data cleaning and data lock, and all the way to analysis. And then keep track of your timelines, and then set up the timelines and look at the tasks within timelines, and then think about who's gonna work on each of these tasks. And that will help you with hiring, will help you with training, and will help you to track the progress of your study. Structure. So you really don't want to have, you don't want to include people in your team, and you don't want to have an understaffed team. You really need the optimal size of team. And I think that organizational charts are very important to kind of to set up basically responsibilities and reporting paths for people, and it's very important for you, and it's very important for everybody, because it's a clear way of telling people these are your responsibilities, and this is the person you report to, and this is the structure of our team. Clarity is always good, and it's always helpful with the teamwork. And then, hiring. It's once you start having a team more than 3 people or 5 people, and this is the case over here, then there's staff turnover. You need to hire people, and then hiring it takes a lot of time, and actually it's a different set of expertise to hire depending on the function. So in my experience, for example, if I need to hire a project manager, I asked our director, I asked Marianne, basically, the director of project management, to hire that person, because she knows the skill sets, the experience, what is needed for that person. So it's not always the PI that actually knows best how to hire people and based on function. So keep that in mind. They ask for help when you want to hire people. Depends on the function. Consider how to foster staff development. Very important. So think about each individuals of these teams, and why are they part of that team, and what's in it for them in this team, and try to carve kind of a career path for them, because that helps you to define where they want to go, and that helps them tell you how to kind of foster their career development. Very important. And obviously balance between work and quality of life. helps a lot with the quality of your team and effectiveness of your team, and also helps with retention, with staff retention. Overworked staff, they tend to leave, and if you have good balance, you'll be able to retain your good and experienced staff. Okay, so what's the role and function of the core team for the clinical trial? I would say it's a lot of operations from the very beginning until the end, and it's a lot of responsibility. And here's the tricky part, and here's the kind of good and bad news for the PIs, that the PI carries the overall responsibility for the trial. And the bad news is that actually you're not an expert in everything. So you're delegating a lot of tasks, you're trusting a lot of people to delegate these tasks, yet at the same time you can't delegate responsibility. You are ultimately responsible for the conduct of the study. So that puts you in a kind of an awkward situation, and this is why it's very important to have good team relationship and hire good team members that you can rely on and you can trust. And you can train, so you're ultimately responsible, but at the same time you can delegate. Meetings should happen usually happen weekly throughout the study. There's always something happening. As I said, have a clear plan of what you want from that meeting, a clear agenda for you and the team members in the meeting, and budget effectively and listen to your team. Most of the people in the team actually have more experience than you in a certain aspect of the study. So listen to them because they know what they're talking about. Okay, few words on project management. What's a good project manager? Usually it's not the PI, however, most PIs start doing everything themselves, but usually it's a different skill set. And usually it's not the research coordinator, it's a different knowledge, skills and responsibilities. Few examples. When you're developing the protocol and the informed consent template, who's best to help you to kind of work on these? You're probably going to need a project manager. You need the data manager to help you to identify what kind of data you want to collect, how you're going to collect them. The systems is how this data is going to be collected in the electronic system, and a statistician who can tell you what data he or she needs to answer the question of the study. And who's best to evaluate the protocol for being patient-friendly? Probably you need a patient advocate. Research coordinators are usually very good at evaluating how long things will take and the feasibility of things. Project managers also have a lot of experience with this. Who's a good person to kind of help you with the model consent form? Project managers are usually very good. The research coordinators also know, they see what kind of questions come up, and the patient advocate can look at it and see if it's clear. Regulatory and contracts, you need to know if you have any regulatory obligations, who's the liaison at the FDA, NIH, DOD, based on the granting agency, and who you need to report to. Do you need an IRB? Who's your IRB liaison? Do you need to execute contracts? Who's your contract liaison at your institution? So a few words about the other members of the team. The steering committee, you need that from day one. These are experienced people with study design. They're responsible they can help you with the scientific integrity, the ethical integrity of the study. They can look at the publication policy and troubleshoot as you move on in the study. The DSMB consultants and medical monitors can help you mainly with the safety aspects of the study. And they are an independent group of people that have access to data, so they review data, and based on that, they can determine what's next in terms of safety for the study. They're responsible for the study participants, the IRBs, the PI, the sponsor, and the FDA. You need a DSMB probably for all phase 3 clinical trials and some phase 2 clinical trials, and there's a very nice NINDS guidance for that. The medical monitor, he's a person that is experienced, he's an experienced physician, usually is a physician, and who's familiar with the disease, the treatment and management, and familiar with clinical trials safety aspects. The SMB members, usually between 3 to 7 members, depending on the trial complexity. Usually you need at least one biostatistician on the DSMB. You need a clinician who understands the disease. You need a trialist who understands the conduct of clinical trials and methodology. You need sometimes a trial-specific expertise. For example, if the trial involves surgery, you probably need a surgeon, you need a bioethicist, and sometimes ad hoc specialist based on what you need. The sites, you need to decide how many sites you need to meet your enrollment target. And then, you know, Marianne talked a little bit of how to determine site feasibility and how to pick sites. And the sponsor, whether it's NIH, DoD, industry, foundation, you need to contact them very early before you submit the grant, obviously, and then you need to send them a progress report and a final study report at the end. Vendors, very important to set up very early on, whether it's for drug, device, placebo, central pharmacy, central lab, sample tracking. Think about what you need for your study. Start to kind of find these vendors and start to have contracts with them, and you need help managing them throughout the study. So I can't emphasize this word, teamwork, for clinical trial conduct. It's definitely not a one-man show. It's a big team, and it's a team that needs to work together in harmony to accomplish a common goal. And it takes a village to conduct a multi-center clinical trial. So I think we're 5 minutes before, 6 minutes before 1 o'clock. And I can see Dixie actually just join here. I can see her on the camera. So I think we can take questions, and then on this, Dixie, if you want to say something.
If we have to turn we probably have to hand the microphone back over.
Hi, this is Dixie. I'm sorry I joined late, but I know Marianne went through the slides that I had to prepare, so we welcome any questions. So I'm seeing a question from Will here. How do you integrate junior investigators? Do they get paid? Do they get part of a coordinator on a larger study? You know, that definitely is something that you need to work out within your institution. So if a smaller study, a 10-patient pilot trial, you're probably not going to be able to come up with coordinator support, and that's kind of where you make your bones and learn from the beginning all the pieces that go into play. But as a larger study, there should be support within your institution and collaboration with colleagues. There's different mechanisms. Everybody kind of needs to work within their infrastructure to figure out where the coordinator pool is, who's available, if there's time available. Really, if you're able to, make contact with a coordinator, if this is all unknown to you, they might have suggestions on who would be available or able to give you some support as you get started, and might not necessarily have a full-time coordinator available to you. I'll disconnect in case.
So I see a question here about how do we determine who's a good coordinator. So I'll take a stab at answering this question. I think the answer is not always straightforward. We have between 10 and 12 research coordinators here, and so usually they come in right after grad school. So right after school, so they spend 2 years with us, so there's a lot of turnover, and I got a chance to kind of hire a lot of people. So usually somebody with some kind of work experience usually helps, because they've been in a professional setting before, and so they kind of know the expectations, versus somebody who just graduated, who haven't worked before. References are very, very important. Even if they worked part-time job during their undergrad, talking to people, references, not only sending the kind of the quick kind of survey and get it by email. It's just talking to people. Usually, you learn a lot about the coordinators. And then, you know, definitely the interview, you want to know, you know, why they want to do this, and you want to see how excited they are about doing that. They definitely need to be very good at multitasking. They need to be very good at keeping deadlines and keeping track of things. They need to be detailed oriented. So I know it's a lot to ask from the coordinators, but these are kind of the qualities for a new coordinator. Obviously, if you get the chance to hire somebody with prior clinical research experience, that's definitely you know, would be much easier to kind of to tell, because you could easily talk to the PI that they used to work with, and you can get a very clear sense of what they can do, what they can't do. There's a question about an FDA-regulated trial.
I think Will's comment.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So I think Will made a good comment as well, just to say that, you know, if you're working on an FDA-regulated study and you have new coordinators, you want to make sure that you have some more experienced staff as well that can help them to answer some of the questions, because you're right, Will, usually the PI is not the answer. The only other thing I want to say about when you hire coordinators is the most important piece is that you, as the investigator, can develop a relationship with this person and have a positive relationship. It's the combination between your personality and the person you're hiring will help, you know whether or not you're going to have a successful relationship. Dixie, I think we can pass it back to you. I know you had some comments as well.
Well, one of the things I'm thinking about for the previous question is whether the coordinators, and you know, between Mass General and University of Iowa, we found some differences in how coordinators are, you know, acquired, trained, and at Mass General, I think there tends to be a lot more that are like graduate level coordinators, whereas at Iowa, we typically see a lot of nurse coordinators. And so, you know, they might not have as much education. So that's part of one of the things you need to consider on what's appropriate for your trial. So, you know, it might be someone with a nursing background who maybe has a 4-year degree, or it might be someone without a nursing background, but they have a master's degree in something else. So you know, different trials have different needs. It depends on whether the trial you are proposing, if there's procedures that need to be done, you know, then you would want someone with a nursing background to do those things. If it's more of a management piece, then you know, then that's a different skill set. So it really, but you know, bottom line, probably the most important characteristics that I would look for are organizational skills, dependability, you know, some of those things that maybe somebody who's better at managing time change than I was today when I thought my the webinar was an hour later. But there are lots of different pieces that are moving all the time, and the best coordinators that I've ever worked with over the years are the ones who have a handle on everything and are always one step ahead of the PI and able to hand them what they need to do next. I'll pass it back.
I think in the interest of time, and we do have some other events going on right now with the mock IRB, I really want to thank our speakers. I think if there are other questions, we can, you know, certainly send emails to our general email, and we can forward them to them. But again, this is, you know, having research staff who can keep you organized and on task and continue to make progress on your research agenda while you have all the other things going on, writing the next grant, writing the paper, going to clinic, doing all those things is crucially important. And you're delegating a lot of responsibility to these folks. And I think making sure that you have the people within your department who can help them grow and learn and acquire the new skills. Or if you're in a smaller department, other people in your institution who've done those larger trials and been there, so that there's a mentorship pathway for the research staff that isn't learning necessarily from you, as you are also new in this. And I've learned so much from the project coordinators and the research staff. As I have said before, I now would give myself a C+ as a primary study coordinator for a clinical trial at the University of Michigan, which doesn't really mean I'm ready to teach other people how to do it, but I can pass at least in that. So with that, let me just remind you of the evaluation link below. Please go to that website, bit.ly/R25eval. And our next webinar is going to be rescheduled. It was already on the books for October 23rd, but we're going to have hopefully Pearl O'Rourke from Mass General Hospital, who's going to talk about special topics in human subject protection. I think that will be really interesting. It will end up being after Thanksgiving. So again, thank you all for your attention, and we will be in contact for the course participants further about the protocols and other activities of the course. So have a good afternoon.